Hello, everybody. This is your host, Mia. Thank you for tuning in and listening to another episode of the one and only SoulWave Podcast. Enjoy. So I've been pondering these two specific questions for the last couple of weeks. I actually got them off a tweet, and I know in the first episode back from season 6, I was like, social media sucks. And it does, but I learned so much from social media. I gotta hand it to it. There's so many resources on there, and you can really create a beautiful space on your social media platforms. Curate it so you only see what you want to see, things that are going to uplift you and help you evolve versus shit that just brings you down. But, it's a contrast, polarity of life. With all good things come bad. But yeah, I saw these two questions on a tweet, and I wish I had took a screenshot of it because I don't remember. All I know it was this kid just speaking on a book, and then he put these two questions, and the two questions struck me because they stood out so well, and I couldn't help but not remember them because then I started thinking into them. And those two questions are, who am I when I'm not trying to survive? And who am I outside of what others need me to be? And these questions inspired this week's episode podcast because I wanted to dig into survival and what it means on the basic level, but also on a deeper level than what most of us are used to, or where some of us or most of us don't even go. So what is survival? I think on a really basic level, it's food, shelter, and water, right? And being in survival mode, it's basically a state where your primary focus is on your immediate needs and safety. And being in survival mode is when we operate from a place of fear and urgency. And it's usually when we're reacting to threats and challenges. So when we feel that our basic needs, our survival needs, aren't going to be met, that's a threat. Or when our survival needs are being challenged. And being in those states and being in survival mode, it creates and manifests so much anxiety, so much stress. And then we have a constant need to protect ourselves. We can't relax. We're operating only out of this state. And I feel like I remember speaking on this many, many episodes ago. And this might be an episode that's still up, but I couldn't really tell you. I can't really remember which one it was, but I'm sure if you binge them, you'll find it. And I went into mass detail about survival mode and being in my town and how most people are operating out of that. Because if you think of just being able to survive, man, you think of money. Although I try to adopt the mindset of abundance, I fall very easily and victim to the scarcity and the lack mindset, which stems from survival mode of fearing you're not going to have enough, that your needs are not going to be met, and all that shit goes back to childhood. But getting back on topic, if you go to a deeper level, survival mode and just trying to survive is driven by the ego's need to ensure our continued existence and comfort. And the concept of the ego has been something I've been studying and researching and diving into myself for the last, I don't know, so many months. The ego is our sense of self that develops to help us, navigate the world. It creates a narrative of who we are based on our experiences, our beliefs, the roles we play in life. It's the ego's job to keep us safe, which often means creating coping mechanisms and defense strategies. And it seeks control and separation to maintain a sense of security. In spirituality, the ego is sometimes referred to as the shadow self. You might have heard that term before, and that represents the part of us that we're not fully aware of, or maybe we even deny. The ego likes to create divisions between us and others, and between our higher self and our lower self. And it does this to keep us in control, to ensure our continued existence and comfort, like I mentioned before. And it's made to keep us safe, not to grow, but it's ultimately a temporary construct. At our core, we are all interconnected and transient, meaning not lasting. If you think about it, one day we're all going to be dust. And at that point, it wouldn't matter what you did or what you achieved. The person next to you looks the same as you, is the same form as you now. But the interconnectedness, this idea comes from the law of one, and I have most definitely, most certainly talked about this on the podcast before because this is something I rave and can nerd out on for hours, and I'm going to dive into it a little more than I've previously had and put you guys on, hopefully. And I apologize for the background noise. I'm in the studio with the window cranked open because there is no central AC. And I live right on a main street, and I'm going to do my best post recording to edit it out, but it's not perfect. And that's just what we do, baby. Roll with the punches. So, anyway, the law of one is also known as the raw material, and it teaches that all is one. It's a spiritual concept that everything in existence is interconnected and part of a greater whole. The raw material is a series of channeled teachings that were brought to light in the early 1980s. The material was channeled by a group known as LL Research and composed of three people: Don Elkins, Carla Ruckart, and Jim McCarty. So, back in the 1980s, these three people all believed that they could contact a higher spiritual intelligence. They believed that there were beings who could provide insights into the nature of existence and the universe and life and earth. So they started to host these sessions where the group would enter meditative state. Well, Carla would enter a meditative state to establish contact with Ra. And Ra is an ancient collective consciousness from a higher dimensional plane. Ra identifies themselves as a collective entity. It's known as a social memory complex. And this means that they're a group of beings that have evolved together over time and shared a unified consciousness and a memory. Ra claimed to be a sixth density civilization that had previously been involved in spiritual development of humanity, offering guidance throughout history. And they called them themselves because it is a collective. So if you, which I hope you get interested by this stuff, but if you ever get the tickle to want to research more, the law of one raw material is actually free online. You can read the transcripts, you can listen to the audio, but just a fair warning, they use language that is like PhD level metaphysical. I don't even know how to describe it, but there's this guy that I rave about quite often. His name is Aaron Apke, and he has a playlist on YouTube that I will remember to link in the description box below that goes all into the law of one. That's actually how I found all this, is I found his YouTube somehow. It was literally plopped right into my reality. It was time for me to learn this because it just showed up one day. And so I clicked on it and I watched these videos and I just dived all the way into that. And when I first heard about this law of one, it felt like I was coming home to myself. It was the most strangest but most familiar feeling I've ever experienced. It feels like I was reclaiming knowledge that I had already always known, but has been buried and suppressed. And it was like the veil was thinning out until this was all I saw. So, diving into it a little more, the entity known as Ra is explained during the channeling sessions that their presence on Earth dates back to ancient Egyptian times, which why the name Ra might sound familiar to some of you guys. Ra is depicted in Egyptian mythology as the sun god. He is, I think, symbolic of creation and life. And according to the channeled messages, Ra and other members of the social memory complex visited Earth with the intention of aiding humanity's spiritual evolution. So when the whole alien thing started to pick up, I wasn't too fazed by it because after learning about the raw material and hearing about their previous visits to Earth, to me, it just sounded like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, personally, I think aliens have been here, quote unquote, aliens, I should say, have been here way longer than we realize. There are these social memory complexes that are looking out for Earth's development and consciousness evolution because Earth will affect everything else that's going on in the infinite universe. So, little tangent. So, Ra and the other social memory complexes that joined him at the time started to share really advanced knowledge and wisdom with the population of Earth. And eventually it was integrated into spiritual and religious practices at the time, but in a distorted way. Instead of understanding the law of one and what it is primarily trying to emphasize and communicate, it was taken in the complete polar opposite, which was greed, manipulation, power, separation, which is all tales of the ego. But anyway, one of the most fascinating aspects of Ra's teachings that I find is that they're claimed to have contributed to the construction of the pyramids. Ra explained that these monumental structures were built using telekinesis, which is a form of energy manipulation that allowed them to move and precisely place these massive stone blocks with ease. And to me, hearing that, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. That shit just makes so much sense. But, try not to grip on to any one thought completely or so concretely. But the pyramids, not only were they architectural marvels, but they were also spiritual symbols meant to serve as centers of learning and initiation and healing for those seeking higher knowledge and enlightenment. And this connection between ancient Egyptian culture and the raw materials offers an extremely profound glimpse into how advanced these spiritual beings who interacted and influenced early human civilization. So, continuing with the teachings of the law of one and that spiritual law, it was conveyed through the raw material that all beings are part of single unified consciousness, and that spiritual growth involves moving from separation and fear towards unity and love. The law emphasized that division and separation are illusions created by the ego. It's about connecting with the essence of things rather than through the ego's lens. Broad discusses the process of spiritual evolution through different densities or levels of consciousness. They also explain that our current third density existence, being here on Earth, is a phase of learning and growth where we develop the ability to love and serve others. The catalyst, though, is mental suffering, which is all tied back to this ego and its need to survive. The ego, or the shadow self, will be forever discovering about our own ego and shadow self, not even as like a concept or theory as a whole, but we will, as an individual, forever be discovering and learning about our own ego. I had a boss one time say, there's a new level, there's a new devil. And I feel like that's very fitting for the ego because it's such an elusive construct. Once you begin to understand and recognize it, it can and it will become more subtle and sophisticated in its efforts to maintain control. The ego is deeply invested in preserving its narrative of who you are through its thoughts, through its beliefs, through behaviors that reinforce a sense of separation and individuality. As you start to uncover and confront the ego's patterns, you'll find that it'll start to adapt and change, and it'll find new ways to assert itself. It will become more challenging to fully transcend it. It can mask itself into various forms, showing up as pride or fear or even spiritual dominance. There's a concept floating around, not as popular, but you might see it here and there, that's called the spiritual ego. And again, that is a whole nother podcast episode in itself because I could talk forever on that, and I will. But don't let the complexity of the ego scare you away from transcending it to what you could transcend it to, if that makes sense. Because the process of recognizing and understanding the ego is the first step towards transcending it. You listening to this podcast right now and gaining a bunch of insight to how it operates and what its base is off of for survival will help you start to recognize how in your own mind your ego comes in to create a disconnect and separation between you and another person. When ultimately, I feel like that's what the problem is with the world. We don't understand enough that We're all one with a stranger on the street, one with our parents, one with our friends, our coworkers, our bosses, one with my cat, my little baby Tony. We're one with the trees and the wind and the water and the sun. We're one with Earth and the entire solar system. That's the law of one. And when you see yourself in another individual as one, there's no need for this greed or this power or this manipulation, but instead you'll feel this natural ease of compassion and empathy come in because you're one. So when you become more aware of how the ego operates, you can start to disidentify from it. You can start to see the ego's thoughts and behaviors as separate from your true self through meditation, mindfulness, self inquiry. Doing these things, it will help create and cultivate a deeper sense of presence and awareness, which will help diminish the ego's influence. You'll come to that true essence, that true being, which is what I also spoke on briefly with Eckhart Tolle's teachings. Eckhart Tolle, the law of one, Abraham Hicks, and the law of attraction, like everything, it is all connected. They all go hand in hand. Eckhart Tolle speaks on the ego and the separation and how a lot of us just don't even realize that we're operating on autopilot because our ego is driving the wheel and that we only use, I forgot the exact number. I want to say 17% though. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it, but only 17% of our mind. Could you imagine what we could do if we utilized our mind as best as we could? More than 17%. Just a wild thought. Because I feel like, and why I wanted to make this episode is I see it in my own life when this lack mentality comes in, when my ego starts to throw these thoughts of self doubt. Negative self talk comes really easily for me because I had overly critical parents as a kid. So that voice in my head, that inner critic, is just shooting straight from the hip constantly. And when I settle into it, when I breathe and I become mindful of my thoughts, when I observe my thoughts, I realize like that's not really me. Nor do I really want to believe that I'm not good enough or that I'm not worthy enough. Transcending the ego doesn't mean eliminating it completely either, but rather shifting your identification from the ego to a higher state of consciousness and allow you to live more authentically and harmoniously, experiencing life with greater clarity and connection to your true nature. I'm going to hit you with some questions because I really want you guys to think about this. How does being in survival mode affect your daily life? And how can the idea of oneness challenge your current beliefs about yourself and your relationships? And what are some ways your ego tries to control or divide your experiences? When I was thinking about making this podcast episode, all I can think about is how for the last year I've struggled in my mind with my ego telling me that I wasn't good enough, or people aren't going to listen to me, or no one cares what I have to say, or people are going to make fun of me. And the list goes on. And that is my ego's way of trying to keep me safe because all the times in the past when I put myself out there, sometimes these traumatic events happened and has brought up a lot of shame and or injury like my ACL tear. So it's trying to keep me safe and I can understand that. However, like I mentioned already, our mind isn't made to help us grow though. And I want to grow. I want to be a better person. I want to chase after my dreams. I want to fail. I want to fall face first into the earth, reaching for my goals. But you can't do that if you're constantly stuck in this survival mode or in your ego and these limiting beliefs that hold you back from a better quality of life. So, as I mentioned, your ego, your shadow self, it is a continuous discovery. And I also, though, want to emphasize sometimes the ego is necessary. Sometimes we have to utilize the ego. And I want to stress the importance of seeing the ego as neither good or bad, but as a part of us, a part of the human experience, because it provides structure and motivation. It provides a sense of individuality and self identity. The ego drives our survival instincts and it motivates us to succeed. And helps us set our goals and pursue our ambitions. It helps us with our social interaction. It allows us to assert ourselves, communicate our needs, build relationships, build confidence, build self esteem. The tricky part is when we let it dominate our lives rather than use it as a tool. The goal is to bring the ego into alignment with our higher self so it serves us rather than controls us. And so I highly encourage you to read or listen to the raw material if you're interested in diving deeper into these concepts. It is such a fascinating resource for anyone looking to explore spirituality and personal growth. And the raw material, as like you previously heard, offers so many insights into the ego as a mechanism for survival and separation. And it describes how the ego creates barriers between individuals and their true unified selves. So definitely check that out. But it was just something I've been wanting to reiterate on the podcast because I know when I first found it, it blew me away. And now being on this journey yet again for the last couple months about the ego and seeing how it shows up in my own life and how it's held me back from going after the things I want, but not only recognizing where it controls me, but trying to figure out the harmony or balance to utilize it as a tool has been very helpful along this journey, as well as the other individuals I mentioned: Eckhart Tolle, Hicks, Aaron Apke. I'll try to list all their resources down below so you guys can have ease in finding them, checking them out. So, to finish up this podcast episode, as much as I probably could focus on my flaws and my insecurities, I want to try and shed some light on who I believe I am when I'm not trying to survive and who I feel I am when I'm not what others need me to be. So, after pondering these questions for a while, I think I have some answers, and I encourage you to adopt these answers for yourself on this introspective journey because we are more similar than some people want to admit. So, with that being said, who am I when I'm not trying to survive? I'm someone who is driven by passions and dreams and intrinsic motivations. I appreciate beauty and visual aesthetics. I love curating my environment with art and decor and colors that resonate with my soul. I express my soul through personalized clothes and fashion and styling that makes me feel confident and authentic. I like to express myself through creative pursuits in different mediums: art and painting, woodburn, drawing, sculpting. I love music and singing and dancing and the layering in songs, exploring different genres of music, playing instruments, or simply enjoying the rhythm and melodies that speak to my soul. I love movement. I love dancing. I love engaging in activities that involve rhythm. I like to also engage in activities like cooking and traveling and other hobbies that bring me joy and fulfillment. I value building deep, authentic relationships with my friends, family, and loved ones. I value participating in community activities, volunteering, or contributing to causes I care about. I constantly invest my time in learning new skills, exploring new knowledge areas, and other personal development activities. Spiritual and mindfulness, practicing meditation, yoga, and other practices that help connect with my inner self. And who am I outside of what others need me to be? I am someone who acknowledges that at times it's hard, but I try to be as honest and true to my feelings as I can without conforming to others' expectations. I do my best to embrace my unique traits and my quirks and the preferences that make me who I am without caring what other people think, although sometimes it does get the best of me. I have self driven goals where I'm pursuing goals and ambitions that are meaningful to me, regardless of external validation or approval. I engage in projects and activities purely because they bring me joy and satisfaction. I am a lover. I love practicing self care, self compassion, and nurturing the loving relationship with myself. I experience and express love in ways that feel authentic to me and fulfilling to me, whether it's through a relationship or through the way I engage with the world. I'm someone who, in the past, struggled immensely with boundaries, but know that it's important to set and create respecting boundaries that help protect my mental and my emotional well being because I'm a giver and I like to design spaces in my life that are just for myself, where I can recharge and reset and be alone without any expectations. And I'm always so curious about new places, new cultures, new experiences that get to broaden my horizons and enrich my understandings of the world. I usually always maintain a sense of wonder and curiosity about life, always eager to learn and to discover new things. So I hope you guys take the time to reflect on these questions like I have, or maybe through just listening to my answers and to what I've come up with after a few weeks of pondering them, that you feel resonant in some of those same answers. So you can gain a clear understanding of who you are at your core, beyond survival and societal expectations, beyond the rat race and the competition. This self awareness, I hope, can empower you to live a more authentic and fulfilling and joyful life because you are so worthy of that. So worthy. And that's a wrap on today's podcast episode, guys. If you enjoyed listening, if this resonates with your soul, it would mean the absolute world to me if you could subscribe, follow, comment, share, like, or whatever it is that you feel called to do or not. Just know I appreciate you being here nonetheless. And any resources I mentioned and my social media links and all that good jazz will be in the description box below. And yeah. All right, guys. I'll catch you on the next wave. Bye.